Okay, great. Well, we've probably got enough people to start. So, and I am concerned about timing for this one. So let's start now. So, ooh, hello, somebody else binging you. Wait a second. Right. Well, anyway, while people are coming into the room, just to say that this is coming to you live and exclusive from a travel lodge just outside King's Cross railway station. So I'm feeling very grounded at the moment. This is really just my attempt to add to the conversation that I can see we've been having all day, which kind of suggests that quite a lot of people are feeling a little bit down, maybe a bit tired, maybe a little bit negative for various reasons about what's happening. I was just saying to Nick that we've got this thing called, Jacqueline called it Chai Co-Brex, the idea of problems of China, COVID and Brexit all happening at the same time. And that's definitely something that's hit me. So it's left me with the situation where basically I'm kind of looking for something to be positive about. And I thought this might be an interesting way to go about it. So to start off with, just to say, I mean, like I do these quite a lot, and anybody who's never been in one of my sessions before, I'm probably not going to give you a lot of answers. We're probably going to end up with a lot more questions than answers. And if that is what happens, that's good. That's kind of what I'm looking for. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So anyway, here's my aim for today. The first aim is a really clear, simple one, really, which is reflecting on the idea of CELTA. And actually, if you're a Delta tutor, it's just as good. But reflecting primarily on CELTA through the concept of time. Then a second idea is, I guess, is that we're going to have to deal with different concepts of what time actually is. And then the third one, I guess we might consider that one to be a little bit over ambitious, the 45 minutes, but I hope we might get somewhere with it, and you'll see by the end, I hope. So to start off with, I think it's always useful to think about, I think Jacqueline mentioned earlier on, about the idea of making sense. I think now is a really important time to try to make sense of whatever it is that we're doing. And of course, anybody doing the kind of thing that we do is already making sense of it. And here I'm just listing a few different ways that people might be doing that already, right? So the first one is basically the idea, if you feel the need to move things around the screen, please do, because this was recorded, made before I realized that we were doing it on Zoom. So yeah, when we're making sense of something like CELTA, for a lot of people, I guess, the first starting point is thinking about things like criteria and syllabus and admin documents and stuff like that. You know, that's one way that we're going to make sense of it. But already hearing several different talks today, there are other ways that people are prioritizing this stuff. So another one might be the idea of methodology. So some people might be, I don't know, flipping, or I think somebody mentioned, I think it was Connor talking about doing a TBL CELTA. So some people might define what they do in terms of methodology, which makes loads of sense. Other people might do it by thinking about kind of socio-cultural and critical factors. This is maybe becoming more of a thing nowadays. And I know it means more to me. So socio-culturally, this might be thinking maybe about perhaps the location of where your course is delivered, and thinking about, for example, I had this in China a lot, what does it mean to deliver a CELTA in China in that local context? I think that's kind of important. Also, talking to some colleagues, not just that, but also if you're training people to be teachers, thinking about what it means to be a teacher from a critical perspective, maybe thinking about issues of gender, sexuality, ability, native speakerism, all of those kind of things. That these ideas are being talked about a lot more in CELTAs, I think, definitely on Delta. Or perhaps psychological issues. So most of us are aware kind of like the individual journeys of people, but also we might be thinking about the psychodynamics of a course. So that's another way of doing it. Or maybe you come at it from a linguistic point of view. If you've got that kind of background, maybe thinking about language itself and how we structure a CELTA course around that. And increasingly the neuro-linguistics. So kind of how does language learning work in the real world? Also, I guess this has come to the fore over the last year or so, technology. A lot of people are building their courses around concepts of technology, digital platforms, how apps and whatever are going to fit together. Now, I'm not here to say that any one of those is right or wrong. What I would say is that we're dealing with what we could describe as a complex environment. And anybody who's ever seen me do these sessions before knows that I'm using complex in a quite technical sense there, which I won't go into right now. But basically, we know that we can't ignore any of these issues, even though we might find that one or two of them are the ones that mean the most to us. So complexity on a course like CELTA can be quite a daunting issue. And I wouldn't deny that that's the case. And that's one of the reasons why I would like to think about doing this in a slightly different way. So I'll start with a really simple warmer, right? As we're on Zoom now, and we're doing this on our own, just to check how many people are here, do you recognize all of these time-related things from the CELTA course? If you don't recognize any of them, if something doesn't make sense to you, then could you put it into the chat box and I'll tell you what the answer is. I'm kind of guessing that you already know this stuff, but you know, if you don't, just send me a little message and I'll tell you what it is. Wow, looks as if everybody seems to be quite comfortable with this. Even the 20+1. Right, okay. Somebody else, 20+1. So 20+1 is in the latest version of the admin document for CELTA, which says that the course should be 20 days, but if it's going to be in the mixed blended format, you need an extra day to manage the transition between, say, online and face-to-face. That's why it's 20+1. Oh, it's Alistair. Thanks, Alistair. 18 minimum age of somebody to join a CELTA course, and 30 is a percentage. The 30% is the minimum percentage that an ACT should be delivering input on a CELTA course. So, right, now that was just basically to get us thinking about the idea that every aspect of CELTA is concerned with time. And the way that we see that time is really important. But also, I don't know, kind of feels sometimes a little bit inaccessible. So what I'd like to do instead is to link it to something else. The idea, I've always wanted to see what CELTA, the movie, would look like. I know I've discussed this with some of you in the past before. So basically, I'm sure that CELTA courses would make great TV or a great movie. So imagine that you're not a trainer, but you're the movie director. If you were a movie director, what kind of movie would your CELTA be? Now, you can see on the screen, I've kind of put some ideas up. These are examples that I think are quite good ones, but you might think of some more. So if you're on your own or if you're in a group of people, it doesn't matter right now. Let's just do this in a kind of plenary way. If you've got an idea of, say, another movie that you think CELTA would be, please put it into the chat box, and I'll see if it coincides with mine. So let's see, have we got any ideas? What does the CELTA movie look like? Road movie? Nice one. Yeah. Okay. What, like Easy Rider or something, I suppose. Yeah, or maybe Planes, Trains and Automobiles. Both of those would be good at that. Yeah, I like that one. Squid Game. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it really does feel like that sometimes, doesn't it? Yeah. The Terminator. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Pulp Fiction. Great. Yeah, great. Okay, well, Pulp Fiction's great because that's actually one of the ones that I've got up here. So let's see if your idea about why it would work as a movie is the same as mine. Drama with a happy ending. I don't know. Drama. What kind of thing are you thinking about, Andre? Maybe, I don't know, what, like Notting Hill, Love Actually. I suppose it could be something like that, couldn't it? Gone with the Wind, Love Actually. Yeah. Right. Okay. Right. Well. Oh, that's a good one. The Godfather Weddings. Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, those are all good. I'm going to come back to maybe some of those a little bit later on. I'm going to try and keep up with them if I can. But just quickly to talk about my ideas here and why I think that these are maybe useful examples. So I've some more coming up. Never mind. I just wanted to. So I've divided these into two groups, which is basically some of these movies are about time, and some of these movies make use of time. So to give you some examples, say Groundhog Day. I'm sure most people have seen this. So Groundhog Day is about time, because it's about this. The story is based on the idea of a man who wakes up and lives the same day over and over and over and over again, right? Which could be like a CELTA. High Noon, bit of an oldie, bit of a classic. So High Noon's the story of the sheriff of a small western town in the good old USA West, and a bunch of bad guys are coming on the 12 o'clock train to kill him, and he's waiting for them to arrive, and whether he leaves the town and stays and fights. Or Arrival is another one. So Arrival is about basically a group of people who meet a group of aliens, and first contact, and the issue that the aliens experience time in a different way. So those are all kind of movies that are about time, but there are also ways that we use time differently. So for example, Rocky is a really good example, right? Rocky famously has got this montage where Rocky gets good at boxing, and he goes from being fat and slow to kind of healthy and fast, and there's music, and he runs up steps, and okay, it's kind of a great example of what CELTA might be able to look like. We've also got, let's see, Citizen Kane. So if you haven't seen Citizen Kane, basically it's about an old man who dies and says something strange, and then the rest of the movie is trying to work out in flashback why it was that he said these as his dying words. And we only find this after what, 2.5 hours of the movie. Another one is Rashomon, classic Japanese movie in which there's a terrible crime, and basically all of the characters remember or kind of witness the crime from a different perspective and have different memories. So they all remember the same thing, but in a different way. And what was left? Oh, Pulp Fiction. So Pulp Fiction is a really interesting example where we have characters, and well, let's say, for example, John Travolta's character, he dies midway through the movie, and yet in the next scene, he's alive again. So basically what's happening is that the kind of the narrative of the movie doesn't follow the timelines of individual characters. It tells an overall story. And I'll come back to that a little bit later on. It might not seem like a particularly relevant comparison, having a director and a CELTA trainer, but in a way, I think there is something that overlaps, in the sense that we both can, or at least could, use the concepts of time to shape the experience, either for the viewer, if it's a movie, or for the trainee, if it's a CELTA. So moving on a little bit more, wanted to look at some examples of the way that we might see time. And at the same time, I'm also aware that time is important for me. Great, good. So anyway, so I suppose maybe the oldest way of seeing time is the idea of time as a cycle. There's no beginning, there's no end. It just keeps going round and round and round. And this is the idea that we get in Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism. You're probably already familiar with this. So we would say traditionally this idea comes from maybe agricultural societies who are very interested in the idea of, say, the cycle of the seasons. And also connecting this to the cycle of life and death. And in a funny kind of way, Pulp Fiction does this, right? Because in a way, what it does is it elevates the idea of the story above any of the individual characters. That's one way we can see that. Hello. Another way, maybe if you come across something like the book, the Unbearable Lightness of Being, this also uses this technique in a kind of very dramatic way, if you've ever read it. So let's see what else we got. So maybe the most common way of viewing, conceptualizing time that we use every day is this one, the idea of time as a line. We could call it Newtonian time. Basically, there's a start and there's an end, and there's lots and lots and lots and lots of points in between. We can measure those points, and usually there is a clear link between cause and effect at each point in time. In a way, the start and the end, kind of, we know that they're there, but they're not what's really important. Generally, just like in the timelines that we use in our teaching, the focus is nearly always on the now and how the past and the present relates to now. Interestingly, I suppose, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a tangent, but generally when we're thinking about linear time, we use space to describe it. So for example, if we're thinking about day as a period of time, and this works for hours and minutes and seconds, traditionally a day is about the rotation of the Earth. It's not actually about time at all. It's about a movement in space, if we think about it. But maybe more importantly, this kind of time is public time, time that we live in and we share with each other. So if I look at my watch and I say, I'm going to meet you in King's Cross Station in 10 minutes, it's the linear time that allows us to coordinate, manage our lessons. And that takes me to the kind of other point, really, which is about that linear time is also a method of limiting and controlling us and other people. And again, on CELTA, we are very, very aware of how time controls and maybe every now and again alienates people as well. But going back to the movie idea, High Noon is a classic idea of linear time, right? So this poor sheriff who's waiting to meet these bad guys, all of the time, his clock is ticking behind his head, tick, 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 moving towards the minute when he knows his doom is going to arrive. All of the focus of the movie intensifies always on his experience as he's moving minute by minute towards this terrible moment. Linear time kind of helps the filmmaker in this particular sense. Right, so another kind of time, what we could call lived time. For those of you of the, well, should we say a philosophical bent? This is very much 20th century time, Bergson, Husserl, Sartre, existential time, lived time. Basically, we all know this experience, this feeling that maybe sometimes time can drag because I'm talking a lot, or maybe because time can go really quickly because I'm having a wonderful time. Time doesn't actually feel like equally measured out units. It feels different. And probably, although this might take a little bit of thinking, the idea of past and future time are interlinked very often. And maybe you could try this the next time that you can't get to sleep in the middle of the night. That generally what happens is the past and the future are linked and they miss out the present. In a funny kind of way, I think Jacqueline mentioned this earlier on. The idea is, for a lot of us, we actually have to work quite hard to bring ourselves back to the present sometimes. You know, that's what a lot of, I don't know, therapies, techniques are about, you know, that idea of remembering that we need to live in the present because we spend so much time experience a flow between the past and the future. And as I've already mentioned, Citizen Kane is a great example of this. basically the whole movie is based on a single moment of one memory of one child, right? But the whole movie is the re-experiencing, the extension of that memory through time. If anybody's ever read Pincher Martin, this is another good example of something where basically the thing that happens on the first page of the book shapes the whole of the rest of the story. I won't tell you what the story is right now. So, a final concept of time, and this is the big one, and probably is maybe a new one to most of you. So I'm going to leave you just for a minute to read this, and I'm not going to say anything. Okay, so this is a big one, right? And I'm not going to say that maybe everybody's going to get this immediately. If you feel it's a bit confusing, don't worry. I've been doing nothing but read about this for the past year, and it still confuses me as well. But to Gilles Deleuze, this is what he calls ontological time. And basically what he's doing right here, as you can see, is he's trying to bring all of these different concepts of time together at the same time. Because what he's doing is he's saying that understanding what time is our starting point. It's not something that we apply later on. We should start with the concept of time. So time isn't just limited to measuring the world. Time isn't just limited to our personal experiences. It's something that comes before that. It's something that basically time is making everything. It comes before our experiences and it creates them. We might try to limit time by putting a straight line on it, but we also intuitively know that that's not how time works. We know that really we're just part of an ongoing process. And again, I think Jacqueline mentioned this earlier on, right? So it can make it really exciting, this idea of constant change. But also, of course, we all know that this is pretty scary as well. So it takes us quite a long time to take it on board. However, if say your interest is piqued by this and you want to know more about it, I strongly recommend reading the particular article that I've included at the bottom, because Deborah Kidd is interested in Deleuzean ontological time, but she's also a teacher trainer like us, but she works in the UK primary sector, and she's an Ofsted inspector. And so she sees the classroom using this lens of time, and her observations of things like classroom observations or the behavior of students, for example, using this lens are really, really interesting. I just don't have time to talk about them right now. So I recommend it strongly if you want an idea. Because I wanted to move on basically to give us a little bit more time to think about what this might mean on something like a CELTA course. So now I guess this might be new for lots of us. So I've got some examples and I'm going to talk through the examples before you have a go at it. So I tried to tie these back to the movies as well. So here we are thinking about CELTA. So maybe you'll remember the idea of high noon. So as I said, it's a clock ticking, a sheriff waiting for his showdown. It's about intensification of time and intensification of how time and experience come together very, very strongly. Now, as with all of these things, we already use this on all of our courses through things like hot and cold feedback. Why do we do hot and cold feedback on some courses? Because we know the experience is different depending on how near or far away in time the reflection is from the lesson, right? So we're already familiar with this idea, but maybe sometimes we're a little bit limited about what we could do. So one of the thoughts that I would have about this one is, what's it like for a candidate in the, say, 5 minutes before they teach their lesson? How is time intensifying for them before they start teaching? The chances are that they're going to be having quite strong experience, and they're probably imagining what's coming along in quite a strong way, right? So why not get them to reflect or to anticipate or to do something before the lesson? Maybe that would be an interesting way to see how things turn out. Another one is the Rashomon effect. Now Rashomon effect is actually a real psychological thing. You can find this in kind of like psychology textbooks, where basically we're interested in the ideas that when it comes to our final versions of truth, people have unreliable memories. We might think we're experiencing the same thing, but we actually remember it and experience it in different ways, it seems. So it got me to thinking that generally, very often when I'm managing a feedback of a group of people, very often the focus of the feedback, even if I don't mean it intentionally, is to kind of hone the group towards a collective decision, usually basically what I want it to be, based on something like criteria. So basically I'm kind of pushing them towards a consensus, an official version of what I want them to have experienced. But does it have to be that way? What would happen if we allowed more divergence, maybe even encouraged more divergence of reflection? I think that could also be an interesting thing to experiment with. The Citizen Kane approach, this one is mine. I don't think anybody else has made this one up. So this is one of the things that I think is really useful with recorded video. I know that for all kinds of reasons, we don't often do this on things like CELTA courses, but I'm a big fan of recorded video. I think it offers us a lot. And also I quite like the idea of critical incident analysis. So this is one where I kind of like the idea where a candidate maybe would choose a single moment in a particular lesson, and then their job is to kind of think about how did time flow up to that point and away from that point, and basically how much time is leaving, because it may not just be the time of the lesson, it could be years. And of course, as our CELTA courses have more and more experienced candidates, okay, the flow of time that leads up to a particular moment could be 20 years for some people, in the way that the anticipation of the time that flows away from it could be another 20, 30, 40 years. So critical moments that often seem forgotten about quickly because of linear time can be let's say, elongated or stretched out, and we intensify them as moments. And then the final one is the idea of the Pulp Fiction method. So this is a very Deleuzean idea, the idea that it's a really sensible idea that we don't always just think in straight lines, but we try to zigzag as much as possible. And to me, this is most useful maybe, or in my experience, when you're thinking about communicating with people who are not like us, who are not experts on this particular course, or not teacher trainers. And I don't know about you, but I have this all the time in my previous job. So I've got a marketing department to work with. I've got a non-teaching, non-academic boss. I've got very often customers who signing contracts who don't know anything about teaching, and even candidates and trainees often, especially on CELTA, they don't know very much about teaching either. So how can we construct narratives that mean something to people that are not like us? Well, there are lots of different ways we could do this, but one way is, for example, when I'm telling the story or whatever, couldn't I start at the end and then go back to the beginning and then leap to the middle? So, for example, if we take something that we take for granted, like good instructions, for example, right? Why not start your story the way that you are presenting to other people outside CELTA trainers? Start with what happens at the end, and then go back to the beginning to see what happened in lesson one, and then maybe jump forward into different points. You don't need to focus on particular personalities. They don't need to know about stage 1, 2, and 3. They don't need any of that. It's using the time the way that a film director would do it to highlight intensifications of things. So those are just some of my ideas, right? But I'm kind of quietly hoping that you might have some ideas and that you're going to give me more things to think about. So I've left enough time, I hope, to set up some breakout rooms. And I'm just going to allocate you kind of randomly into breakout rooms. Actually, I haven't even checked if I've got access to that at the moment, but let's see. Oh no, I haven't got breakout rooms. We didn't do it, did we?
No problem. I'll set you up now.
Oh, could you just put the breakout rooms for me? That'd be lovely. Thank you,
There you go. You can do it now.
Ah, there we go. Right. So I'm just gonna, let's see. We've got 20 odd people, so I don't think we want. Oh no, 18 people. So let's say about 4 rooms. So I'm going to. Let's have a look at this just before I do it. So can you see the slide on the screen right now? These are just some kind of like focusing ideas that would allow you to think about what I've been talking about. They're not really questions that you need to answer. They're just something that you could use for reference. If it seems useful, then take a screenshot. If it doesn't, and you'd rather just compare it to a movie or relate it back to something that you've already done, then please do so. But breakout rooms are going to be starting very soon. I can see some people have actually chickened out, but there's still plenty of you left. Right. So thank you for staying with me on this one, and off we go.
I'm on an iPad, so I can't tell how many people are in our group. There's 3 of us. I think Darren. Oh yeah. How are you doing? Long time no see. Yeah. How are you doing? Is there anyone else in the group? Looks like there's just 2. Oh, there's 3 of us. Oh, Bridget. Hi, Bridget. Nice to meet you. Sorry, I've got a weird gallery thing going on. Have you guys got any?
Hey, I think we're all back. Great. Okay, so I haven't got very much time left. So I just wanted to, I'm going to use my notes and I'm going to just talk about some of the things that different people picked out. So Tom and Tom strangely turned out in the same room, but one of the things that you guys were talking about is kind of the performance aspect of a trainer or a teacher, and that this adds to that feeling of intensification. And I think that's a really interesting idea to explore. And I think so. I think it was. So the other Tom was pointing out that kind of like the traditional 4-week CELTA course deliberately intensifies the experience of time, and maybe, especially with online or longer courses, maybe we've moved away from that, and maybe for some of us older ones or old timers, maybe we miss that intensification of time. Maybe that's maybe we don't have a problem with technology. Maybe we just miss the experience of it. Bridget was talking about the idea about, I think as mentioned in one of my examples, about the idea of maybe thinking a little bit more about what people do before they do it, rather than always thinking about what they do after they've done it. There's, in some ways, there are merits. Let's see. Jacqueline was also talking about maybe a little bit about the idea of how you could use this kind of cut editing approach to narrative to communicate. It might take a bit of practice, right? But just thinking about that, you don't say, if you look at a CELTA 5, it's very linear, isn't it? You go from page 1 to page 50, and it's all about, this is the first stage, this is the second stage, this is the third stage. We might have a habit of thinking about the course in that way as well. We don't have to. Why can't we start at the end? And at least the way we communicate it to other people, maybe that sometimes can really work. And so I've got a couple of little things that I wanted to pick out just very quickly. In fact, I'm just going to talk about it because I haven't got much time left. So some closing ideas. So at least one of them, a little controversial, is to say, the CELTA that you manage, is it a cliche or is it an experiment? Because it could be an experiment, even if it's not. And it doesn't take much to experiment. Also, whenever you repeat something, are you taking the opportunity to use the repetition in a different way? Repetition doesn't have to be the same every time. That, in a way, that's weird, but it's true. Also, going back to what Jacqueline was talking about earlier, how can we focus on the change rather than the state? Philosophically, how can we focus on becoming rather than being? Because we know that there's something there. And this is the Deleuzean in me, but can we move away from a focus on what we should do towards what we could do? Because there are 1,000,001 things that we could do that we haven't even tried yet. And so when we were talking earlier on about positivity, this is my kind of positivity. Positivity is about the idea that what we do, even if we've done it 1,000,000 times, can be exciting. It can still be exciting by going back and looking at it in new ways that we've never done it before, and not being scared of trying new stuff just because that's not the way that other people do it. So thank you very much for taking part. And I'm going to sign off from the Travel Lodge and see if I can find my nearest pub. So thanks very much.